Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Our guest today wants you to undead your life. Let's find out more from Jodi Wellman. Jodi, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me here. I'm excited to chat about undeading with you.
Now, Jodi, to our audience, you are an assistant professor, if I'm correct, at the University of Pennsylvania. That's the Ivy League, the big time, right?
Yeah, assistant instructor in the Master's of Applied Positive Psychology program.
Okay, so this is a legitimate, we're not playing with ghosts and the paranormal and, maybe it's there, maybe it's not. No, I mean, this is really legitimate stuff that you're talking about, but it's a cute title, Undeading Our Lives. So tell us what that means. Open that door for us.
Okay, well, I am more than happy to. So I've become increasingly interested, and then upon researching, I realized, wait a minute, this is legit, about how we can use the idea of our mortality. And let's be honest, it's more than the idea. It's the reality. It's the sad fact of life is that, yes, we are all unfortunately temporary, but using our mortality as a motivator to actually live with more intention and purpose, to really live like we mean it. And so 4,000 Mondays is actually the name of my business. And I did that because we roughly have 4,000 weeks to live and do this life justice. So I really get down to the business of let's count how many we have left as a way to use them to our advantage.
I love both those titles, and I think for our audience, it's an easy way to remember it. 4,000 Mondays. If we are looking for you, if we type that into our computer, we're going to find you. And, of course, the undead, that attracts people. I guess we all think of chiller theater or something from our youth when there were monsters and ghouls, etc. But this has a legitimate, and that's why I wanted to emphasize that this is something you actually teach, and it's a course that people take to learn more how to better themselves.
You know what? I have a course that I do on my own as an online course. So it's not in the master's program of positive psychology, but I was really encouraged when I was doing my thesis several years back that this topic is something that is really validated in many ways. And so I will not bore you with the details, but the concept is rooted in this idea called temporal scarcity, which is the idea that, and you can relate to this, right? That when we have something in front of us that we see is it's like a limited time only situation, or it's rare, or it is temporary, our perception of its value tends to kind of go through the roof. And so that's exactly what the goal is to do with our lives, which is to say, while this is not news to anybody listening, that again, we are all going to die, we like to go through life kind of glossing over that fact. No one likes to talk about death. I don't love talking about the bitter end, but I do it in service of saying, wait a sec, if we can tune into that, can that help us to be a little more alive in the amount of Mondays we have left? And of course, the answer is generally yes.
I think so. And by the way, you're never boring me. I find all of this in fact, I jotted down real quickly, temporal scarcity. I think that's going to be the name of your next talk or your next book or article. So I want to be online to be one of the first ones to read it, because to me, this is great stuff. This is a lot of fun.
Great.
Now, you talk to your class. Now, again, you're dealing with an Ivy League class. These are people who they've taken every activity in school. I've seen some of those resumes come in, and they're on every sports team and every activity, and they do every charity, and I don't know how they even get their work done, and yet they're exceptionally smart people. And you talk about living a squander-free life.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean, and how does that apply to most of us? Again, not the Ivy League type student, but the regular Joes, myself and others out there.
Yeah. And thanks for saying that, because, most of the work I do is with the regular Joes and Janes. And the reality that many of us face, and I think we can unfortunately all nod in agreement, that we tend to slip into autopilot, right? We take life for granted. We get into these routines and habits, and we all of a sudden feel like, wait a minute, where did the month go? And then where did the year go? Wow, that went fast. And we do tend to sometimes stop and say, wait a sec, I feel like my life is passing me by. And that is the definition in many ways of squandering. And sometimes we know when we're doing it, right? Like I know when I'm squandering a whole evening watching one Netflix show after the other, because they're very smart how they just automatically serve one show up after the other. You don't even have to press button. That's conscious squandering, and sometimes we need that. Other squandering, though, is when we stop paying attention to really participating in our lives. Or if we want to get kind of psychological about it, many of us are actually a little bit intimidated and we're afraid to participate a little deeper because we feel like maybe there's a bit of a risk to look like an idiot if we go and sign up for that volleyball league and, we're not going to do well, or it takes us out of our comfort zone because we get really sucked into the comfort zone of autopilot. It's just a natural human tendency.
That's a great point, because I'm thinking someone like a doctor now, they don't want to do something that's going to embarrass them, or, a lawyer or a professional person, accountant. They have a high position in society, and we look to them, we rely on them to interpret our tax law, our litigation, our medical situations. They don't want to take a chance. So I was just about to ask you, when you got into that topic, what do the students do? Do they look at you and say, I'm taking every course, I'm doing this, I'm trying to please my parents, I'm under a lot of pressure. What else do you want me to do to undead my life? What am I supposed to do? Should I jump out of a helicopter and try skydiving or river rafting? Or where do they go with this? Do they just try a marathon or what?
Yeah. And I like how you went to the thing that I think we naturally do, right? Is we tend to go to extremes. Like, okay, if I want to quote unquote participate in my life, it does tend to feel like it's all or nothing. Like I do need to do the extreme sports or anything that's going to activate adrenaline or anything that's going to make us feel supremely alive, as the polar opposite to, being in the Netflix coma on the couch. And I want to just stand on the mountaintops and say, no, wait, living a life worth living is totally relative to each and every person, whether you are a student or you are an executive or you're any other human being. And so for each one of us, we have an idea when we know that we maybe are in a bit of a slumbering sort of existence, right? Like, I should be maybe acting more active in my life, or there's a domain of life. So I find this helpful for people, is to look at your life holistically, right? We have the career is a really big chunk, but your family's another chunk, and your friendships and your recreation. Remember hobbies? We used to have those. It could also be, your financial area. It could be your growth and development area. It could be your spirituality section. It could be your health, right? How much you're moving and how you're nourishing yourself. All these domains of life, we're already kind of in touch with. Wait a minute, that one's feeling pretty good. But that one's flatlining, right? Like, okay, I know my social life and maybe my love life, those need a little bit of work. And so that's where we can then say, well, what would be one thing that you could do when you were feeling even more alive in that category that made you feel better about your life? And it might just mean, you know what? I kind of miss, because of COVID, I got off kind of the doing a happy hour once every few weeks with my friends. And maybe I just need to pick that up again. And that is, in many cases, the answer to feeling more alive. You don't need to go jump out of a plane. I'm not going to stop you. I do think that's fun, but most of us don't need to do that.
I'm just thinking again, as you're talking, give me the answer to the previous question. I'm always coming up with a new one. I'm thinking the first week of class, do you have a standard first assignment? And at least in my mind, I'm picturing you tell someone they can pick what they want to do. And if they're not sure what they want to try to kind of shake things up, do you suggest they stand on the corner and just sing a song? And if it's around the holiday season, they could do a Christmas carol or whatever would be appropriate. Or, join a marathon group or a singing group or something?
Oh, great question. In the online course that I do, which is for individuals, I can get a lot more creative with that. And, I have been known to encourage people to spice things up in that way. And sometimes we do need a little bit of a challenge to get out there and do something in it can be zany. But I also respect that, for many of us that have been living in a comfort zone, especially post-COVID, in COVID, some people need a nudge, some people need a shove, some people don't even want that. And so usually it's about each person getting in touch with when I was feeling most alive, what was I doing, right? Or so when I was feeling at my best, because most of us have different versions of ourselves. We have our ultimate best self. And then we have, maybe hopefully that's who you are today, but usually we're angling to kind of to be a better version of ourselves. There's an exercise, like go back in time and analyze when you were feeling at your prime, what were you doing? What was a typical day like? What was a week like? And you look at those domains of life. And so for some people, they might say, that was when I was going to that sketching class. I did like an 8-week sketch class. And I was going for walks every morning with my girlfriend. And you know what? Maybe I think I could pick that up again. And that's the thing, is that it doesn't need to be grand. Some people want grand. Some people need grand, right? I need to book a trip to New Zealand to do something fantastic. And again, if that floats your boat and that fits in your budget and your schedule, super. Because again, this idea that life is short, do you want to get to the end and feel like there are a bunch of things you wanted to do and you didn't do? That, to me, that's a lot of the fear for a lot of us, is getting to the end with regrets.
I have so many more questions for you, but unfortunately at this point in the show, I have to remind our listeners that if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Jodi Wellman. She's an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's telling us how to undead our lives. And Jodi, we're going to ask you, where can we get more information after the show about this? Is there a website or somewhere we can find out more?
Yeah, thanks for asking. You can go to 4000mondays.com, and there are lots of resources there. There's even a calculator where you can calculate how many Mondays you have left in case math is not your specialty.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And you're making it easy. Well, I only have 3 Mondays left. I better get going and do things here. But I appreciate that. I'm wondering if when you're dealing with your class, or I don't know if you deal with them one-on-one, but did anybody ever come back with something really unusual? They said, that really surprised me. Did they say, I always wanted to go fly fishing, and I took off 2 days and went fishing with my dad or my roommate or a friend of mine or something? Did anybody, or even maybe much wilder than that, did anybody come up with something totally unexpected or really different?
Yeah, well, this is a coaching client who was in his early 50s. And, it's funny, I went on a sabbatical last year with my husband. He was off for 8 weeks, and I was able to take 5 weeks, which already is just delicious.
We all want those jobs. We're going to be writing to you about those jobs. How do we get a 5-week vacation and an 8-week vacation?
How do you do that right?
Yeah.
So I was working with a gentleman, just this super amazing, successful guy in a very senior role in sales. And, he was getting the itch, needing something different. So I said, hey, we're going to reconvene in 5 weeks. I come back from my sabbatical, and I come back and he says, I've decided I'm going to go on a sabbatical, only it's going to be a permanent one. And so he made the grand choice to leave his job, register for an 8-week cooking program in Florence or Tuscany. I can't remember which one now, but they'd both be excellent. And start a new life of, he was calling it sort of he was combining like a retirement sabbatical, meaning he reserved the right to want to go back and find a different kind of job. But that to me is an overhaul grand life gesture that I think is exciting to hear about. And I want to be very cautious, because I think for a lot of us, it creates an implication that to live life fully, we have to just do these massive shakeups. And for many of the people I work with, they are, in their career or starting their career, and they long to maybe make a change. And a lot of what I recommend is the idea that you only have a finite number of A, Mondays in life, but B, working Mondays. And so life is, if you wake up on a Monday and you love what you do, that's a very different feeling than if you wake up and you feel that sense of dread. And that's what we want to avoid. And I don't want to impose pressure that we need to shake things up and everybody hand in a resignation letter tomorrow. No. That's not feasible for most of us. Not all of us can go and quit our jobs and go to Tuscany. However, making the big choice to say, how do I work? If this isn't right for me, how do I make the bold choice to get out of a situation where I feel stuck? Because back to your question earlier, Bill, about what is squandering. Squandering our lives means, in one definition to me, settling, tolerating, being in a situation where it is so far from adequate, but that, well, I don't know what to do about it. And so I'm going to just stay here and hang out for a while. But then here's the thing. Hanging out for a while turns out to be another year, which turns out to be 4 years. And then all of a sudden, maybe it's a decade of your life in a job that does not ring your bell, does not get you excited, does not use your strengths. And that to me is a travesty, right? So sometimes it does mean massive changes, but usually it is just subtle commitments to say, I'm going to do the thing that feels difficult, but it's in service of living a life worth living.
I'm just thinking, too, maybe the job you're doing, I don't mean you personally, but anyone listening, maybe it was great when you graduated from college and that was your goal, to be a math teacher or to be head of the English department. But after 12 years, things have changed and life has changed, and perhaps your life has changed, too.
Well, that's so well said. I think we need to leave room for evolution and how we do grow as individuals. And that once upon a time, it felt like it was a negative aspect to make career changes. And I actually encourage that, you know what, that we have so many chapters. And to be honest, like, why not go back and pursue them? I'm working with a woman now who is pretty senior in her role. And she went through all of the different sort of struggles in her mind of, I want to go back to school to get into something about veterinary medicine. She wasn't even, like, she was working in business finance, like not even close. And she went through the whole thing of, yeah, but I'm going to lose my stature. Yeah, but I'm going to have to start at the bottom of the totem pole. Yeah, but all the reasons we give ourselves why it's not a quote unquote responsible choice, until we did the work and she realized, I want to live a life that's happy. I want to live a life I feel fulfilled. And also, how cool will it be when I am 90, being able to look back and tell my grandkids and great-grandparents' kids that I started a totally different chapter because I felt like it, because I was willing to shake things up and maybe make things uncomfortable for a few years, but go back to school and do the thing you long to do. And then, you know what? Maybe in 12 more years, you might do it again. And that's okay.
I think, and I'm just wondering, you'd be the expert, obviously, on this. Did the COVID have a big influence on this? Because there's something that came out of nowhere for most of us. Mm-hmm. And if someone had predicted it, even, we would, on one of the TV shows, we would have laughed at them and said, okay, yeah, go away and come back in a few years. Did that show a lot of people life is short, and it really enhanced what you're saying about the 4,000 Mondays, that we really don't know what tomorrow may bring or 3 months from now?
Yeah, it is such an interesting question because you would think that it would. And I'll tell you where COVID, I think, was useful for us to live life well. And I also think that it didn't help us. So many of us, of course, are getting back into, the groove of life again. And I think we got into habits that maybe worked during lockdown, but don't serve us now. And so we need to learn how to live again. That's fine. Many of us did clarify our priorities because we got to stop our routines. And that, to me, is the biggest opportunity, because part of the reason we have these slumbering lives is because we just get locked into the routine of the Monday to Friday, and then there's a Saturday, Sunday routine, and that can be very numbing. And so the routine got jostled, and it gave us a chance to stop and assess and say, wait, I don't know if I like my lot in life over there. I'm going to change that. And that was useful. But here's where I find things fascinating. I do research where I assess from, it's self-reported, how do you feel? And I have these two dimensions. So I believe we make our lives wider by adding in more vitality. That's the fun stuff and the pleasure. And then we make our lives deeper by more meaning. And that's the purpose and connection to others. And you put that together and it makes for 4 quadrants. And I won't go into it with you necessarily, but what I will say is that the same percentage of people find themselves in the meaningfully bored category before COVID, during COVID, and now after COVID. Which to me is interesting, which means just as a state of being human, many of us find that there's enough meaning in life, but we're bored. We're not doing enough stuff that feels exciting and interesting and kind of riveting and the novelty and the fun stuff and the things that are a little more on the happiness side of things rather than the meaning side, right? And so that for me is like, that's low-hanging fruit. Like that's a dial we can all adjust today.
Jodi, I'm just thinking now, you're at a school where there's a lot of competition for the students. They're all in there. They've been top of their class for years, or a specialist at something in their school, either science or football or cheerleading, or they have an excellent academic record. Do any of them come to you and say, I'm tired of that world. I want to go to Slippery Rock Community College and just be a cheerleader and be one of the many and not stay up till midnight making sure that I get a 98 or better on the test? Did you ever have a student who actually, I don't want to say rebelled, but found that there's a different world out there for them?
Well, you know what? Indirectly, yes. And I will say that the master's program that I am an assistant instructor in does not publish grades in a competitive way, which is a beautiful thing. So they're competing against themselves. And believe me, these people are they have a lot of self-imposed pressure, but thankfully there is no ranking and rating to know who's top of a class. So they're like that fortunately is actually not even an equation, which helps to eliminate that comparison, which, as they say, is the thief of joy. So now what I will say is that a lot of the clients I work with one-on-one who are leaders, I work with a lot of leaders who confide almost like in a whispering hush that I don't know if I want to lead. Like I just kept getting promoted and I thought it was the thing to do, but I just want to go back to doing that thing I did when I was an individual contributor. Like, that made me happy. And now I've got all this garbage of dealing with people and their problems. And so that is one of those other, I think that's another hamster wheel we get caught up on, right? Is got to get promoted, got to lead, or got to be the best in class, when no, we don't.
That's actually one of the things I was thinking of. Do we go too far and miss out? We often hear from a school administrator, I'm doing a good job and I'm making a lot of money, but I really love teaching second grade or chemistry or, working with the track team. But now they're in a different world and perhaps missing out on something.
Yeah, and we do get caught in the trappings of success. And I had that in my career when I was working corporately. This is now 9 years ago. I was so scared to leave my corporate job because I didn't know what to do, but I was also very comfortable with the benefits and the compensation and the title and all the things that I thought extrinsically looked good, sounded good, felt good. And again, when your body's giving you signals, when you have that sense that we typically get, which is this all there is? Or that feeling of, and my ultimate question is, if you were unfortunately to find out tonight that it was your last night, you're on your deathbed, sorry about your luck, would you look back and feel that pang of regret about stuff? And it's usually, regrets are funny things because we can regret things we did do, but mostly we can rationalize those away. We mostly feel uncomfortable and regret things we didn't do. And so regretting, for example, man, I wished I had just left that job where I felt like I was trapped. I wish I had just made that choice to leave the big job and go back to that thing I loved because I loved it. And that's an example to me that is pretty prime for people.
I'm giving a talk in a week from now, and I'm actually going to use that line and tell the people, and I'll give you credit for it, but it's to seniors and say, what is it something you wanted to do and would regret on your deathbed? And what would you like to do? One thing that I have to do now, and not necessarily like to do, but is to take a brief break and let our audience know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Jodi, Jodi Wellman, Wellman. She is proposing the theory of let's undead our lives, and I think it's very interesting, as you're hearing today from Jodi. Jodi, can you give us a website where we can learn more?
Oh, sure thing. 4000mondays.com.
Easy enough. And that's 4,000 spelled out or the number?
Either road will get you there.
Oh, excellent. Okay. And to our audience, if you missed part of the show when you're saying this is perfect for my husband, my brother, my son, you can go to nccradio.org. That's nccradio.org, and just look for The Secrets of Success and then look for Jodi Wellman's name. And you can replay the show anytime. It's a podcast that's convenient for you, or if you have a relative in another state or another time zone, no problem. They didn't miss the show. They can learn all about these interesting techniques and what to do. I read something in your notes that it helps to have a near-death experience. Now, obviously, we don't want that, but sometimes it happens to us. We're in an accident or something is close. Why is that helpful?
Yeah, you worded it well. While we don't want it, it's funny because I always feel like a little bit envious of people that I meet through my work or through, they might be a client. Because a lot of the times clients will come to me because they say, I now have been woken up and I don't want to lose this epiphany that I've had, which is that I've seen the near edge. I've peeked over the edge and I just want to make sure I'm making the most of it. So the benefit ultimately of people who've had a brush with death, and it may not be the near-death experience where they literally, flatlined for a few seconds, but even just that feeling of maybe it's a tricky diagnosis, but they recovered or they're in remission, or like you said, a car accident. They experience what psychologists call, and I love this phrase, they call it the roar of awakening. And it is this idea that they now see with clarity the things that the rest of us don't, because we're just walking around taking our time for granted. They see, I almost lost this precious thing. And now, again, back to the temporal scarcity idea, that now they recognize that it was mine to have. I almost lost it. Now I will value it. I will treasure it. And what do I want to do with it? Consistently, here's one of the biggest observations I've made, and this has now come together. It's coalesced in probably the last month. The more people I speak with and putting together a paper on this, it's that one of the number one things people actually let go of after they have had a brush with death, because they now have the clarity, they seem to be able to dismiss caring about what others think of them. And that is the cloak that the rest of us wear. And it's a heavy cloak. And it holds a lot of people back, right? Holds me back. I don't know if it holds you back.
So the breakthrough lets them say, I don't care what my neighbor thinks of me or my sister thinks of me. If I want to try skydiving or snow skiing or ice skating or something, which might be risque for certain people, I'm going to try it. Who cares?
Yes, do it anyway. And then there's even an extension of that, because you are certainly spot on to that. There's another part of it that I don't care anymore if I say no to a request, that I don't need to please anymore, because many of us feel that sense of obligation that when someone says, can you help me with this? Can you help me move this weekend? Can you join this board? Can you work with me on this committee? We feel badly and we want to say yes. And then we overburden ourselves and then we get bitter and resentful, but we don't ever tell them. We're mad at ourselves. Whereas I look at these people and it feels to be a pretty consistent thing that there's a releasing of that sense of obligation, because there's a little bit of a, you know what, I'm not going to be rude and tell you no, but I'm just going to quite simply say, you know what? Sorry, I'm not able to help you out. Hopefully next time. Because again, that to me is a really interesting reflection about a better understanding of time, right? Because it really makes sense. If you see my time's limited, why do I want to spend it helping you on that committee that is of no interest to me, but I would have just said yes to please you, where that's what most of us do, unless obviously if the committee interests you, then do it all day and all night, go for it. But for the rest of us, it's I better, because you know why? We don't have that view of time anymore. We don't have that special, precious view that time matters. So that's the work that I actually do, is I do not bring people to the brink of death in any of my retreats or interventions, but I want us to do that thing where it's like, how can we benefit from a brush with death, what that gives us, without having to go through any of the medical trauma.
You've given us so many wonderful ideas today, and really, I think, obviously, life-changing ideas. Thank you so much, and please keep us on your list, because we want you back, and we want to find out when your next article comes out, and hopefully some of us will undead our lives a bit by then. Jodi, before we wrap up, quickly tell us again, what is the website where we can learn more?
Oh, thanks for asking. It's 4000mondays.com.
Easy enough. Thank you so much for being with us today. We'd like to remind our listeners that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.